Thank you for coming. How many people were here last time? Thank you for coming back. And we have some new people then, obviously. You know, last time, if you weren't here, we had about 120 people. We had a very, very active session where we were broken up into tables and basically asked a number of questions and got a lot of input. You can see basically the results of that input. We're very, very fortunate. The council administration got together and strongly support us doing a couple of things here. Number one is updating the community plan, which goes back to 1997, so it's obviously, it's a good time to look at it. And the second thing is to take a look at what's called spaces and places, which is really city facilities, parkland connections between different city properties, and also looking at city facilities, and also again getting information from you as far as what the needs are, what the wants are of the community. We have two great groups we're working with. One is McBride Dale. This group has worked with us a number of times over the years and has done some area plans for us. They are very, very familiar with the community, and when we thought about going in and doing a community plan, we reached out to them because we feel they've got a good understanding, and we really enjoyed working with them. They've done an excellent job in giving us excellent products. One of the founders of McBride Dale is Greg Dale, who basically is founder. He's also quite a prolific author of a number of planning documents and training, so he's a great background and well recognized nationally, and we're thrilled to have him. Is Elizabeth Fields here? There you are. I haven't seen you. I was outside. Also a planner with McBride Dale, and actually quite familiar with the area. I think it was up Arlington. We don't hold it against you. It was Bexley, but she's very familiar, and we're happy to have her here. They are the community plan group. The group that is actually looking at spaces and places is actually a local group that most of you have heard of as NDDJ. They will basically split the presentation between the two of them. Kim Wei, who is principal in charge in China, doing research for us, I'm assuming. And Megan Sinha, who is here, who is basically a planner, an architect, and really a very, very good project manager. At least she tells me that. So we're thrilled to have her, and you'll enjoy working with her. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because they're going to keep you busy tonight. Thank you very much for coming and interact. It's what you give us is how we make decisions and gather information, and from that, it's what we can give you back. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. As Mayor said, my name is Greg Dale with McBride Dale Planning. Let me just tell you very quickly what we're proposing to do here tonight. And then I'm going to turn it over to Liz here pretty quickly. So we're going to try to spend as little time here talking tonight as we can, probably just another 10-15 minutes. We want to update you on some of the things that happened at the last meeting, because for those of you who participated in the last meeting, what you will be doing tonight is a direct outcome of that. So we're going to do a little bit of talking to explain that, but the bulk of your time is going to be spent working at the maps. Mayor said, what we get from you, what you give us, is really going to help guide this process. So most of the time you're going to spend here is working with these maps. Once we break this part of it up and you work at the maps, when you're finished, you're free to stay or go as long as you want. There will not be any more presentations. So you can stay as long as you want or as little as you want. So let me just give you a couple of things. We've already done introductions. Kim's not here, but Taylor Shanley is also here. Get that right? With NBBJ. She's been helping out also. All right, we're involved in a planning process. I promise I'm not going to read you everything that's on here. What I want to do with this particular slide and this particular graphic is make you aware that there are actually two planning processes in one here, as the Mayor described. The one is the community plan, or you might have heard it called a comprehensive plan or a master plan. They're basically the same thing in terms of an overall plan for the community. But what makes this process a little bit unique is, at least starting in the beginning, concurrent with that is a civic spaces and places plan. And what's going to end up happening at some point, once we get through some of these first steps, is it is going to end up splitting off and becoming its own process. So the reason I'm telling you that is when you're looking at these maps today, I would ask for you to keep a couple of things in mind. I want to introduce a couple of terms to you. The private realm and the public realm. All right, so I just want to explain what those are because they're important for how we're going to ask you to interact with these maps. The private realm is just private property. If you own a house with, with a lot, that's private property. That's what we call the private realm. Now, that's relevant to planning because zoning, which I'm sure you've all heard of, regulates private property. Now, we're not writing zoning code here, but a comprehensive plan or a master plan can set the stage for land use regulations. So a comprehensive plan can talk about desired future land uses, and we're talking about the private realm then, what happens on private property that you own or a business is owned and so forth. But we want to also ask you to kind of think about the public realm. All right, so the public realm is streets, right? So what happens within streets and public right-of-ways, and it may relate to traffic, it may relate to sidewalks, it may relate to bicycle, it may relate to landscaping and streetscaping, but what happens in the public realm is very important. Parks are part of the public realm. That's a very important part of what we're going to be thinking about here. Schools are part of the public realm. The property we're on is part of the public realm. And one of the other issues that's important in this planning process is the civic functions of the city of Grandview Heights. You know that City Hall is up on the hill. You know that there's property down at the bottom of the hill that the city owns. And so thinking about police and fire and municipal offices and parks and recreation and all those sorts of things is a very important part of that public realm or civic space concept. So I just would like for you to keep that thought in your mind as you're looking at these maps and we're asking you to make comments on it, is think both about the private realm, where businesses are, where they shouldn't be, what kind of uses you'd like to see, but think about the public realm as well, because that is very directly within the control of the city of Grandview Heights. So hopefully that makes sense to you. I just would ask you to kind of keep your mind tuned to that. A couple of things. I do want to talk just a little bit about the previous meetings that a lot of you were at, so I won't go into a lot of detail. You know, we had about 100 people that we're estimating were there. 85 signed in, 55 completed the exit questionnaire. So we had a really good turnout. A couple of things that we heard, just to kind of get you thinking about some of these planning issues that you're looking at these boards. In terms of neighborhood comments, I don't have to read these, you can all see it right there in front of you. We did hear a lot of concern about maintaining the socioeconomic diversity as the community changes, property maintenance, maintenance of public ways. Tree protection was a big issue, whole concern about community character, traffic flow, concern about density. Those are all the things we heard related to neighborhoods and neighborhood preservation. Comments about the business and development. Strong desire to encourage local businesses, meaning not just out-of-town owned chain kind of restaurants, but locally owned businesses. Parking, streetscape improvements, that's part of the public realm. The whole issue of development along Goodale Boulevard, you're going to see that on one of these maps. I think it's all the way back there, Area 4. I would ask you to spend a little bit of time on that and think about that, because when you look at around Grandview Heights and you think about, you know, what could really change, where are there opportunities potentially for something different than you have now, if that's what you want. Certainly Goodale Boulevard is one of those areas where it has a lot of different potential. It could go a lot of different directions. That's a very important one that people are concerned about. Businesses being accessible to pedestrians. And then a lot of comments about civic spaces and places. Better maintenance of playgrounds, library, parks. Some very specific things like need a dog park. So we would like to hear very specific things from you. Better utilizing the park at Nationwide. You know, all the things that you see there are the things that we heard. That bottom one is the one that I mentioned before. A very specific issue, but a very timely issue for the city. Where should City Hall be? What kind of space should it be? How should it relate to police and fire, parks and recreation, and so forth? All right, so what we then did is that we had participants work with the map, and I'm going to ask Liz Fields to come up and explain this from here, because this is really going to set up the exercise that we're going to be doing here in just a second.
Thanks, Greg. So for those who were at the last meeting and for those who weren't, we had large base maps of the city, so basically it's just a pretty simple map of the city, and we asked people to categorize the entire city into one of three categories. So we asked them to use green for the stable areas of the city, that, stable areas that you want to preserve, protect. It's, it's functioning well, it's working well, it's a positive attribute to the community, mark that green. The blue areas were representative of transitional areas. Maybe these aren't the nicest areas of town, but they're certainly not the worst. They're currently under development. Grandview Yard was marked blue a lot because it's obviously still under development. There's still a lot of shovels in the ground and dirt on the ground. And then the red areas were the areas that need the most change and the most kind of analysis and insight for how we should move in the future. So we took all the maps that were created at that last meeting, and we overlaid them on top of each other to come up with the composite map that you see in front of you. So what you see here is the areas that are green and are strongly green are where there is the most consensus that this is a strong, stable area.
Give us some streets and landmarks.
Okay, so the high school is up here. This is Grandview Avenue. This is Goodale down here. This is Goodale. This is 33. Grandview Yard is here. We are, right about here? Not about here, we're right here. So Grandview, First Avenue, Northwest Boulevard. So again, the green areas were the areas that had the most consensus of, these are stable areas to preserve. There's a lot of the kind of consensus on blue areas of First Avenue and Grandview Avenue. Those are areas that have a lot of strong, but there's also areas that are, in transition. Kind of this murky, bluish, greenish red color down here for the yard, and then the residential area that's on the other side of Northwest Boulevard. And then there was real strong consensus of the southern gateway into Grandview and the Goodale corridor, that's kind of the strongest area that's in need of change for the community. Again, these are kind of just sort of highlighting those areas. So we looked at each of these to really understand where the community agrees, where the community doesn't agree, on all of these three things to really inform, how we want to move forward in this planning process. So this is sort of a summary of that information to kind of take out some of that murkiness and sort of assign one of those three categories to each of these areas. So this is a starting place for us, and we're going to use the information that we get from you tonight and the remaining of this planning process to keep taking this information further up until the point where we actually have specific recommendations for different areas of the city. We also, at the last meeting, had a civic spaces and placing mapping exercise. So we asked participants slightly different questions than the first one. Do you want to explain? Turn it over.
Thanks. So for the civic spaces and places, we asked folks to do a few things. One is mark all those areas which you currently believe are used as civic spaces. Mark separately those spaces that you believe have the potential to be used as civic spaces. And then take a green dot and mark your favorite civic space, and take a red dot and mark your least favorite civic space. So as a result of that, so that's a composite map of that. All the green areas are those areas that the community said are current civic spaces in their mind. Anything that's bluish, light blue, is are areas which have a potential to be serving civic functions. Green dots, favorite civic spaces, and red dots, least favorite. So again, just for orientation, middle school, high school, elementary school, the library, the current council building, municipal building, this is where we are. Goodale, Grandview Yard, McKinley Park. So you can see the pattern. For us, I think what's very important, if you just do a squint test, any area that's marked, no matter what color, for us that's an opportunity zone to explore further. So hopefully today in our conversation we'll hear from you specific ideas, specific thoughts, specific visions for any of these areas. again, just marking up those areas a little bit. So right now what you're seeing are the ones that have opportunities to serve civic spaces. Yep, right.
Yeah. All right, so now we're going to talk about what you're going to do today. So tonight's activity is we have taken the city and divided it up into 13 districts based on those comments that we received with that color composite. So this is your map of your 13 districts. You can find this map on the back of your agenda as well, so you can have that as a resource, but if you need some orientation, this is your best map. So you can kind of, if you recall back to this map, you see a lot of parallel diagrams between this map and how we establish these different districts. Because we wanted to look at these areas of blue and these areas of red individually so we can get more information of why you think these areas need some help. What are your thoughts for Goodale Boulevard? What are your thoughts for First Avenue and Grandview Avenue? So the 13 areas are each displayed on a board around the room. Each board has a map of the district, a zooming map of the district. It also has a little key map to kind of give you a sense of where in the community is, along with a couple of pictures. And then we're asking you on each map to answer some questions, and they're the same questions on each map. So we want you to kind of think about these same questions at each area to garner some kind of thoughts and feedback on the future of each one of these districts. So the 3 questions are on the screen here. So the first being, what are the successful elements within this district? What are the successful businesses, the successful land uses? Is this a strong commercial district or a strong residential area? Are there strong elements that, there's good sidewalks, there's nice street trees? What are the successful things that you really like about the district that you're looking at? And again, those are going to be different, and for each of these districts, and there may be similarities across them as well. The second one is, how can this area be enhanced or improved? So, we want to know what you like about these areas, and then what is falling short of these areas. Where do you see improvements? You want better sidewalk connections to, other areas of the community. There's too much, not enough parking or too much congestion. Maybe there's too much pavement and you want more green space included, whatever it may be. So how can these areas be enhanced or improved? And then the last question is more geared to that civic component that we're talking about, is, looking out to year 2050, how do you see this area contributing to the civic life of the community? So again, that can be anything in that civic realm of, you want to see certain programs at the community center, you want to see a community center, you want to see a dog park, but, where do you want to see that happen? So kind of specific things of how do you see each district contributing to the overall civic life of the community. So think about these questions and record your thoughts on the board. There are Post-its and pens at each station. So we want you to record your thoughts about these questions on the Post-its and then stick them to the board. So if you have a specific thought about, this intersection is really unsafe and we want improvements done, write that on the Post-it note and stick it to the board. If you see a comment that is on the board that you agree with, take your pen and just mark a check mark on that comment. We'll record that as a sign that there's multiple agreements to some, to one comment. So we don't need 8 Post-its saying the same thing. There's also an overall civic framework map that is here for your review and comment, so please take a look at that. We'll have somebody from MDBJ around here to help describe that. Yes, and we're going to go, so again, here's your overall framework map. It's here for your reference. And then this is an example of the board of just how they're set up. So they're each set up in the same way with the overall map, the pictures and the questions. You can see them around the room. And then here's the civic framework structure map. Do you want to?
Sure. Say a piece about this real quick. So the mayor touched on this as well as Greg, but we're talking about civic community places, right? But please don't forget about the places in between. The parks, the schools, everything that we have are tremendous assets for the community. But the connection in between those can be just as important. So this diagram up here is really trying to look at what are our gateways, what are the key corridors through the city, key intersections, and how do those relate to civic places and spaces. So be aspirational, work with us. We'll be at all of these boards, and we want to hear what your thoughts are.
All right, and just final comment. So obviously we have this set up as an open house, so you can start anywhere. You don't have to go in any particular order. If you only want to go to certain districts, that's fine. If you want to go to every single one, that's fine. Make sure that if you have a comment or a thought, you write it down. If you don't write it down and put it on the board, then we're not going to remember it, and we're not going to know that you have that thought. So make sure to write things down. We also have comment forms that are on the back of the exit questionnaires that were on the front table. So if you want to record your comment on that and give us a piece of paper, that's totally fine as well. And this input will be used to inform the remaining of this planning process. We're going to use this information to help guide guiding principles, vision statements, further recommendations for how we want to move forward in this community. So it's invaluable information that you're giving us here tonight. Oh, and with capital improvements? Oh yeah, it'll help inform capital improvement budgets.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Any questions? Okay, well, feel free to wander around. We'll be hanging out by the boards after